Okay, this lecture is going to focus on the kidney. So we did a little video. If you're not sure, go check it out. On that talked about kidney anatomy using this model. We're going to go back and forth between this model and the picture and do a little labeling. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the renal capsule, which is this outer membrane, epithelial tissue membrane that helps that wraps around the kidney to give it its distinctive shape. Gives kidney its shape. Okay, so that's the first part. And then the next structure is called the renal cortex. So we've seen that word cortex before. And the renal cortex, because there are other cortexes, sorry. The renal cortex is all of this pinky looking stuff. It's kind of the matrix that everything sits in. So, which is probably the best word to describe it, matrix. To keep the nephrons, the renal medulla, keep all of the different structures in place. Keep the internal structures in place, so they don't slide around in there. I have to say, when you dissect a kidney, they're not super exciting. They're actually pretty boring. So the renal medulla is this whole fan-shaped, acorn-looking structure. So every kidney has about 7 to 8 renal medullas. And we've seen this word medulla before as well. Okay, so the renal medulla's job is urine production. This is where the nephrons are found. So there are 8 to 10 per kidney. This is the nephrons. The nephrons actually go between the cortex and the medulla. So when you look at this structure, so this, see how it has like a couple of different tissues here, and then this white kind of represents a nephron, although they're a lot smaller, they're very microscopic. But this is the renal medulla sitting inside the cortex, surrounded by the veins and arteries and nerves and everything else. So the next thing is this weird structure called the renal pyramids. So the renal pyramids, it's always kind of hard to find a picture of them, but they're kind of this weird little structure that kind of separates the parts of the renal pyramid, parts of the renal medulla into its separate sections. So they're found in the renal medulla. There are usually 2 to 3 per medulla. They're also involved in urine production, and we recognize them because they're kind of this weird pyramid shape. So they look like a triangle. Okay. And then the next major structure that we need to recognize is the renal cortex. I'm trying to see if we have a good sinus. They're calling it the sinus. Oh no, renal pelvis. Sorry, here it is. Renal pelvis. I'm using a new diagram this year. Sorry. So I'm trying to get the hang of it. So the renal pelvis is all of this space right here. And then, so the renal pelvis is where urine collects. So its function is urine collection. And even though we consider the kidney a solid organ, it actually has this little cavity right here where the urine starts to fill in the renal pelvis. Okay, so urine collection, and then this connects the kidney to the ureter. So, and I kind of like this one because it does a really nice job showing this. The other thing about the renal pelvis is it has a couple of regions. So this is more of a big kid anatomy thing, but it has the minor calyx and the major calyx. Minor, small, major, large. So this kind of region right here, minor calyx. And then where it widens and these guys kind of join together, major calyx. Okay, so this minor up top, these little kind of regions right here. Sorry, probably shouldn't use red and orange. And then the major is kind of these bigger where they start to kind of collect. So all these little regions right here close to the renal medullas are the minor calyxes, and then the spot after that is major. So if you look at a kidney, so this is Miss Perzicki's lame attempt at drawing, and you know it's not my forte. What happens is, so you get this kidney. Okay, got that part down. And then you have the renal pelvis, and we're just going to simplify it by kind of making it look like a C. Okay, and then you have a ureter that connects off of it in the right here, ureter. So what happens is as the urine drips down out of all of these, it starts to fill and eventually starts to spill over. And then peristalsis takes it down to the urinary bladder. So this is the guy that does all the work. So in these little renal medullas and the renal cortex, there's a lot of filtering going on using the nephron. And so our next lecture is going to focus on the nephron.